Good morning, friends. It's Bob again, bringing you another reflection. And I like actually in the week after I do a message on Sunday, I like a lot of times to reiterate and to explore some of the themes that I wasn't able to get into as quite as deeply in the Sunday morning message. And if you have ever communicated anything consistently in the public arena, it's just very frustrating because you get to give a certain amount because you have a certain kind of time restraint. And then there's all this other stuff that you think is important that you don't have a chance to actually to say anything about. So that's part of what I'm working out in this is I want to share with you a number of concepts. And last Sunday we talked about the temple of God, the residence of God on the earth being us together, the people of God. And with that kind of in mind, I read a number of passages, but I want to start by reading to you 1 Corinthians 3, 16 and 17. It says, "Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? For God's temple is sacred and you together are that temple." Well, in the ancient world, I think that it's lost on us because we don't have that here. But in the ancient world, there are temples everywhere. Every god, small g god, has to have a house, has to have some sort of a place where they can be venerated and worshipped. And so there are temples literally everywhere. If you go to especially to Greece or to Turkey or to Israel or any places, there are temples literally everywhere. And temples to gods in Rome. There's just temples to the Roman gods. In Greece, there's, you've got the Parthenon, which is a temple to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens, Athens. And so there's temples simply everywhere in a polytheistic kind of a context. Then the people of Israel have got their own temple, and that temple is the epicenter of everything. The temple that is the place where all of religious life and all of life itself actually rotates around that temple. Their relationships rotate, moving. Actually, there are priests that serve in the temple that actually take turns in coming in from out and outlying areas. It's that integrated. The temple is that integrated into all of Jewish life. Jewish people would make typically 2 pilgrimages a year to different feasts at the temple, and that are all temple centric. There's a lot of thoughtfulness that comes from, I'm going to be visiting God and I don't want to be there empty handed. And so there's fear, there's reverence, there's respect. The high priests are in that temple. They actually make atonement once a year on the Day of Atonement, which we would call Yom Kippur. That's the Hebrew name of that. In Yom Kippur, the priest would go into the most holy place one time a year, only one time a year. That's where the ark was. That's where the most holy place, where the mercy seat was. And he would bring an offering for the people and pour the blood on the top, on the atonement cover, on the top of the mercy seat. And it would cover the people's sins for a year. And that was such a holy thing that at least it's thought that the priest would have little bells at the bottom of his garments so that if he stopped ringing and there was a rope attached to his foot, that if God killed him in there because it was so holy, that they would be able to pull him out. They'd be able to extract him from there. What I'm saying here, and where I want to explore with you a little bit in these next couple of posts, is that we have lost this sort of concept of holy, of the holy, and that we treat everything kind of as secular. Nothing is really sacred to us. And so if God says God's people are the temple, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, one of the things that it really means is that you and we treat that temple, that gathering, that place where God dwells in our midst, we treat that as a holy thing. And so the way that we speak about God's people, even people that are not like us, that don't have the same convictions about the same thing as us, that we see that God's people are God's temple. And because of that, we treat it in a way that's sacred. We treat and we talk about it with reverence and respect and a degree of fear, because we're talking about the bride of the Lamb. We're talking about the bride of Christ. And God He just cares about that. So if somebody came to me and said, "Bob, I really like you, but I don't really like your wife," that would offend me, and rightfully offend me, because my wife is so attached to me that if you don't like her, that does something to me. It hurts me. It offends me. It rankles me. And I think that we need to actually start to adopt that when we talk about God's people, because God's people are God's temple. And as a temple, then we're something sacred to God, and we need to start seeing ourselves as sacred to God. So that's just a start of taking some of the themes that I talked about on Sunday and exploring those a little bit more. We'll talk about those some more, but be thinking about this week, what does it mean for something and for someone to be holy and to be holy for God? It might mean something stiff and religious, but that's not what the scripture actually means. It means that it belongs to God, and so therefore it has this kind of intrinsic value, and it is to be treated in a certain kind of reverence, respect, and honor. That's our Devo for today. Thanks so much for joining me. I love you. God bless you.